It's my great pleasure to introduce our guest for this evening, singer-songwriter Daniel Cainer. Daniel's been coming to the Edinburgh Fringe since 2005, and sadly, as you all know, the Fringe and the other festivals can't happen on the ground this year. So we thought it would be fitting to have an event with someone who's become a regular and very popular performer at the Edinburgh Fringe. Daniel's shows feature original songs exploring his relationship with Jewish history, culture, and his own family true life stories. Performing in Edinburgh for the first time in 2005 changed the direction of Daniel's musical career and took him on several unexpected journeys. So we're going to hear about that and much more tonight. So good evening, Daniel. It's really good to have you with us. Let's get started.
Okie dokie.
We'll come to the events of 2005 in a little while, but first I'd like to delve into your back catalogue. I believe you began performing when you were about 3, and then you played your first instrument when you were 7. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I think I began performing a little bit before that, probably at about 3 minutes. And so essentially, I think I was born with a desperate need for attention, and nothing has really changed very much. And in some ways, I'm probably actually aspiring to that same level of attention that I had then, and it's never been equalled. But I did start, could always pick up an instrument and play bits and pieces by ear and everything. And I did. My dad gave me this ukulele, and instead of, bringing us up in an atmosphere of sort of more rarefied music, basically he decided that he would give us a George Formby record, which me and brother Adam, he's on. I'm looking. There he is. Adam's waving. That's my twin brother, Adam. In fact, so we learned all the George Formby songs back, all off by heart, and I played the ukulele basically, and sort of led our little duo. We were sort of Simon and Garfunkel sing George Formby. It was a joy to behold, and we used to go around various sort of Jewish old age homes, and they would marvel at the precociousness of it all.
And you were doing this when you were 7.
Yeah, so something like that, yeah.
Amazing. Now, you grew up in London and Leeds. Were your family very involved in the Jewish communities?
In London, definitely. Well, it was just outside London. It was a sort of southwest. We lived in a little place called Long Ditton, and which is just near Surbiton, which is near Kingston. In fact, Kingston was the community that we belonged to, Kingston and District Synagogue. It was a modern Orthodox, and yes, they were very much part. It was a relatively small Jewish community, and they were, I guess Frumish, and that was our life. It was a very Jewish life. Yeah.
And you went to what? Jewish classes on a Sunday.
Yeah, we went to Cheder every Sunday, and we didn't actually have a rabbi. We had Reverend Jackson. Adam who could help me with this actually, but we had Reverend Jackson, and we would go, yes, every Sunday religiously. Of course, anybody that's familiar, and I'm sure some of you are, with my faux epic story song about my parents' divorce, the Surbiton Washarama, will know that whilst we were going to the Sunday morning Cheder, there were other things going on.
Yes.
But yes, and just actually, I've got this queued up just to give you a typical example of sort of suburban, middle class Jewish modern Orthodox life. And because it's high holidays coming up very soon, here, for example, is very typically this was our Happy New Year card that went out probably in 1967, I think. And there we are, 3 jolly little boys wishing everybody a Happy New Year. That was before, of course, the fall that happened very shortly afterwards.
We'll come to that a bit later. Yeah. And that's also, I presume, why you moved to Leeds.
Yes, although the family were originally from the north, and my parents actually from Bradford, and my parents moved to London. They got away from Bradford. I don't, for various reasons, want to get away from their parents. My dad got a job down south, actually, as it happens as well. So they left the north, but basically we were a northern family. My grandparents were originally from Leeds. Then my grandfather, who was a GP, got practice in Bradford, and so that's where they were brought up.
So, continuing your musical story, I think I'm right in saying it was when you were 14 you started playing more, and I don't know if you were still doing the old folks' homes, but you started playing in folks' clubs. Is that
No,
right?
yeah, I wasn't doing old folks homes anymore, and I, in fact, I had very little. It probably wasn't really associating that much after bar mitzvah. I really didn't have much to do with the sort of Jewish world or experience. But yes, I used to go out with my guitar, and I used to play in folk clubs. In those days, you could turn up at any folk club, and there was a folk club almost every night of the week, and so you could turn up and do a floor spot as long as you got there early enough. You'd sign up, and there'd be a main artist who was a touring folkie, and then I would just go every night and go and play and sign up and play, and so I would become as regular as anyone playing on the folk club circuit, and then I got my own residency because it was a little bit of I guess I was a little bit precocious, and I was unformed, but there was a certain, obviously people could see a certain talent, so I got a regular sort of residency at this Monday night folk club. It was at the place called the Bistro 5, and in Leeds, and so that's what I do every night, and then the other nights I go and I do floor spots. Yeah.
When did you start writing songs?
Oh, then. Yeah, so I had a repertoire of songs then, none of which I don't think have actually survived. But I was carted off to go and record them by, a record producer who was going to make me rich and famous, or certainly, well, neither of those things happened. And we went to a very, very glamorous recording studio to do this in Huddersfield, actually. Yes, there is one, or there was one. I think it's still there. It was called... and actually because it was a folk thing, it was a folk recording place, and so yeah, all that stuff was happening, and I was, I thought I was on my career track, which I suppose I was.
And what got you into songwriting? I mean, you can understand if you've got instruments in front of you, you'll experiment and try and learn with them. But what about songwriting? Why?
Couldn't help myself. I mean, that was just it. Even before that, I mean, I think, one of the first songs I can remember writing as a topical songwriter was when we moved. Some of you remember when the postcode came in, which was the sort of UK. Suddenly, the UK had a postcode like a zip code, and the postcode came in. I wrote a little song about that, and I was recalling it the other day and realising that I'd made a terrible songwriter's mistake by rhyming R with R, so I couldn't possibly even sing you a snippet of it now. Sorry.
Are you sure?
I would be kicked out of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, which I don't belong to. Anyway.
Okay, so you're in Leeds. You're writing songs. You're playing. You get into a recording studio. What happens next? Does that go on for quite a few years? And
well, what happens next? I mean, I'm going to school. I'm doing O levels, and I'm doing all that kind of thing. And I'm very tired at school, it must be said, because I'm out every night and stuff. But I get through all that and various other things, which I won't go into here. And I end up going down to university. And then, but I'm still playing, and I started playing in folk clubs and things in London at the same time as being at university. But I was not terribly happy there because I'd left home at 15, so I was kind of amongst my peers. Had already, they were. I felt somewhat older and more experienced than them, and it didn't quite gel. So it didn't quite do it for me, and I wanted to go make my fortune. My brother Jonathan, who perhaps more about this later, but we have kind of parallel sort of maverick career paths. He had founded an alfalfa sprout business which was failing rather badly. All this is documented in another faux epic song called "Doing the Best I Can," but which is available on Spotify and at all good streaming services. And he was needed to escape the country because there were various debtors after him, and I was also trying to escape a broken heart. And so we both got on a plane, this is when I guess I was 19, to LA, to Hollywood, where I was going to make my fortune, and he was going to be my manager, and that's what happened next.
Amazing. So, I mean, you're playing clubs at 14. you're in London at 19, and then Hollywood. All very young. Was anyone looking after you, or was it just Jonathan?
Well, I think I'd learned. I mean, as I'd left home at 15, I kind of learned to look after myself, really. Because even at that point, even all the way through doing A levels, and I left school and I went to a college to do A levels, which was kind of unusual then, unless of course you needed to retake, or you were doing an HNC is what they used to call it, isn't it, in car mechanics or something. But yes, I had, I was earning a living because I was playing in wine bars and various other places around Yorkshire. Effectively, paying the rent by playing. So I guess I could have done with some looking after, and that is probably a subject that I'll keep for my therapist. But I suppose on the other hand, maybe a greater power was looking after me. Who can say?
So in LA, you're playing music there as well. You were
Yes.
getting gigs.
I was getting gigs. A few things happened as almost immediately arriving in LA, which was quite interesting. I won't go into too much of the detail of it, but first of all, it was just a lot of exciting, fortuitous things happened, and I ended up actually being. I did a concert in Leeds. You'll appreciate this, David, and whoever it was who your colleague is who had the mixing desk on their virtual background, because I did a goodbye concert in Leeds, and we hired somebody from BBC North to record it. And they recorded it on reel-to-reel tape, old-fashioned reel-to-reel tape, and so we took this is going to be our demo that we took around Hollywood to play to all the people, and it was sort of still is to some extent the home of the singer-songwriter, and I was escaping the idea that this was all terribly out of fashion in the UK at that point. So we got to LA with this tape, and we had to play it to people, and again, a long story, but I met this girl called Jude, who was a songwriter that was actually who's been set up with a little career by Bruce Springsteen and company, and so she had access to this very fancy pants studio that Bruce Springsteen and other people recorded in, and she says, "Oh yeah, you can come to my studio and we can hear this thing. We can hear the tape. They've got a real plate." So we kept ringing the studio every day. Can we get in? We want to get to the listening room. We can't get into the listening room, and it's like every day. No, we can't get in. It's busy. Can't get into the listening room. Oh, who's in there today? Oh, Bob Dylan's in the mixing room. We're going. And next day, Bob Dylan's still in the listening room, and this is only after about 10 days of being there. I'm saying, "Can you get out of the listening room, Bob Dylan, so that we can get in?" That was what was one of the exciting things that was happening. I mean, you felt like I'd arrived. Anyway, got into the listening room and actually listened to this thing. It wasn't quite the sort of Grammy-winning material that I would hope it would be, but still. I did various auditions and talent contests and this, that and the other. And there was a club called the Blah Blah Cafe where a lot of people played and a lot of stuff happened. And I did an audition there one Sunday afternoon. And the guy there came up to me afterwards and says, "I want you to," and he gave this is the equivalent to the Bistro 5 thing, but he gave me a residency there, and he says, I want you to play every night here. I want you to use the place, work on the piano, do all this sort of stuff, and I will, he was going to be my high fiddle-dee-dee in actor's life for me. He was going to be my, coach me in a career, and he made Jonathan, who was supposed to be managing me, if you like, he made him the manager of the restaurant at the Blah Blah. So there were these two little, although we didn't see ourselves as Jewish boys arriving there. This was what was happening. In fact, I've got a little picture here of me sitting outside the Blah Blah Cafe from that period. And
you haven't changed at all,
no,
Daniel.
Yeah, that's right. Just put the cap on, and you couldn't tell, could you? Really? So that was that. And if you play your cards right, I might even have a few seconds of a clip of me actually playing inside the Blah Blah Cafe.
That would be great.
If that's of any interest at all. Of course, I should really put this to an audience vote, as I can see everybody. But you've no choice. I'm going to play it now anyway. Let's see.
Oh, great.
Oh, there we go.
It's called Love Is Around. something they can't find. Everyone you see is searching nonetheless. Some of them may make exceptions, but I am not that kind. I just have to tell you something about hopelessness. Love is around, but you're not gonna find it there. Love is around here.
Anyway, I think you get the idea.
And that was one of your own songs.
It was indeed. That
Yeah.
was the. Sorry about that long
It's lovely.
not intending that transition there, but yes, that was. It actually got somebody covered it. Very well. Well, they didn't actually end up releasing it, recording, but they recorded it and learnt it. And I tell you who it was. Her name was Liza, and she was Stevie Nicks' personal assistant. That's who she was.
And so, who were your musical influences at that time?
Well, all the singer-songwriters, really, I suppose. You know, that's what I wanted to be, and that's partly why I went there. You know, so all of that lot, all the Laurel Canyon lot. So you know, certainly Randy Newman, and I guess let's Paul Simon's in the New York lot, and the Jewish ones, and the not so Jewish ones. You know, also all of that, but largely, I suppose, you know, West Coast American music with a bit of music hall and George Formby thrown in.
So, you know, any good story has its ups and downs. I believe you had your ups and downs in LA, and Jonathan did as well. And that sort of pushed on the next part of your story, your life story, and musical story.
Yes, I mean, you know, it was. You know, it was close but no cigar. I mean, there's so many anecdotes that could come out of that time, and actually, it was very formative. And to some extent, I still feel like LA is my second home because it was just so strong what happened there, and all the the intensity of it, and the need, and the possibility, and that's the whole thing. The joke about Lana Turner being discovered in Schwab's and all these things, it's just riddled with it, and you think, well, there might be a possibility, poor for little old me, and of course the reality is, like anywhere, you know, it's like it's a lottery win, isn't it? You know, but having said that, I had a modicum of talent and things were being waved at me as a possibility, but then I also, the same thing that had broken my heart that sent me there, also in a way took me home again. I followed that, and Jonathan, dear brother, who wasn't making a great hash of managing me either, it would appear, also. He was a bit broke, but funnily enough, I mean, I don't necessarily want to tell his story, but some of you may or may not know, but he went on to be the kind of a very, very successful astrologer, and it was in national newspapers, well, all over the world and on the web until he died fairly recently. But that was where he discovered, you know, he had no money, and he went into a shop. It was in Venice actually, and he went into a shop and he saw this. It was to make money by reading horoscopes, and he said, "Oh, I could buy that, and I could read people's horoscopes." And he reached into his pocket, and there was, lo and behold, there was a $10 bill. It's like absolute magic. It wasn't there before, and then suddenly it was. Manifestation. So he bought the book, and then he became probably the world's most successful astrologer in a fairly swift amount of time.
That's amazing. So, just chance, isn't it? It's just one of these things.
Yeah, well, now he's the world's most successful dead one. But there you go. That's and there you go. The ups and downs of a career arc.
But Oscar's taken over and doing.
Yeah, well, Oscar, my son actually has. Yes, it's a family business, you know. So
yeah.
He's doing it, you know.
So, but you both come back to London. And what happens then? I mean, you.
What happens then is I'm still writing stuff. I mean, I still want to, make it in the music industry as a singer-songwriter. And actually, Jonathan comes back and convinces me to spend what little tiny bits of saving I had, and also, you know, I happen to have a credit card, so we maxed that out and spent that on. spending some money in a studio again in the north. Actually, that was in just outside Leeds, called Rick Rack. In fact, it was called Rick Rack. Went in there and recorded this great song called Into the 80s. The only slight problem with it is that it was already 1981. So I think as a topical song, it had just missed the mark by approximately 2 years. But it sounded quite good. And so again, and I did some other thing, and I went to chapel music, and I went around all the things, and people, there was things like, yeah, you've got it, and when you produce it, I'll have it, said the man at chapel music, that was then subsequently very quickly fired. So always trying to do that, and then I knew some people who were friends and contacts who were directors in television and starting out, and they asked me to do music for that. And also it was the time of home studios. I went to work in the studio. That's what I did. And I learned the ropes in a proper studio for a bit. I was a tape op, and then I bought my own stuff. I borrowed a load of money against the house, much to my father-in-law's horror, and I set up with this studio and started doing stuff because I could. Because
so Billy, I mean, you were still very young, and
yes.
You're learning all the time
Yeah.
in Leeds, LA, and now in London, and working with other people. So you must have been getting lots of really good experience.
Yes, well, I learned a lot working in the studio with other bands and other artists, and how things were done and how records were made and all that kind of stuff, of course. And then started making my own music, and also a lot of the skill of writing and scoring for television and short films and things like that. So I was doing all that, and then having learned those skills, people started.
I think you met someone that was also quite influential. Mr. Bat.
Oh, well, that was a little bit later. Yes,
Yeah.
It was a little bit later. But yes, I mean, I started getting jobs as also music technology and stuff in big studios in Abbey Road and West Side and various places. And one of those places I met Mike Bat, who some of you will know, who was his original big, huge breakthrough was with a thing called the Wombles. Although people don't realise that he was also behind so many huge hits, including Bright Eyes with Art Garfunkel and Katie Melua later on in his career, the biggest selling English female artist in the world for a while, and so tons and tons of stuff. And so I became, we have definitely glossed over a lot, but I became his right hand for a little while, right hand person. And again, scoring stuff. And actually, he decided he would relaunch the Wombles band. And so I was in that for a little bit, doing a few personal appearances. And I was in a Womble costume, playing the bass. I was Madame Cholet, as it happens. So if you happen to see any Wombles material from that period, and there's plenty on YouTube, that'll be me.
So in a way, you were a female impersonator as well. Gosh.
Yes, that's right. I probably was. I mean, I think you could say sort of gender fluid before it was fashionable.
Very good. But so this almost takes us to the point where you are writing topical songs. And I think there was one particular song in particular that moved you into radio as well. And
yeah, so I started writing, I wrote I was playing then the place called the Songwriters Club called the Cashmere opened in London. It was great because there was a place that you could go and play stuff, and there were other songwriters that were going. So I went there, and it was around about the time of the Clinton thing, Clinton and Lewinsky thing, and I wrote a song about that. It was called "The President and His Knob." And it became a bit of it was my bad rabbi of the day, if you like, and it became a bit of a hit in amongst them. And somebody heard it, and they said, "Oh, I work for LBC, would you come on do a song and do it on the breakfast show, and in fact do one every week of some sort, but not that. You have to do different. That was too rude, so I had to tone it down. I wrote a different one. But then I got this gig on LBC on the breakfast show with the hosts were Anne Diamond, who had originally become famous with GMTV, and Sir Nicholas Lloyd, who prior to that was the editor of the Daily Express, and so this odd couple would have me on the Friday morning, doing a topical song every week. Yeah.
And was that quite a lot of pressure to produce a song?
Well,
Food
particularly because rather like a chef that will not use anything instant. So and it has to do stuff from scratch. My pride told me, and actually not even my pride, I just didn't really know how to do it. I didn't do parodies. So sometimes there are people that do that, and for a while, Mitch Benn, for example, used to do a parody thing on the Now Show. But I don't do parodies. So I write everything from scratch, and yes, pressure. You think such pressure already, and it would end up me just sort of flying in there at the very last minute, having been up all night doing this thing, and then having to look cool and composed on a radio and produce something, and then at the same time I got a TV gig doing a similar thing on a business program on Carlton, and the difference with that is that you can't just sort of fly in and you have your words in front of you and all that kind of stuff. You're on screen. You've got a performance. You've got to get from it's much less forgiving. So and for a while I didn't even realise I could use autocue. So I was doing two, sometimes a different song because it was appropriate. So doing 2 a week, and then also, fortunately, there was the Cashmere, so I could give it another outing. Even so, before largely it was thrown away. Yeah.
Very good.
In fact, I may even have a little clip from one of those.
I was just about to ask.
Yeah. So I can't quite see what I've got rigged up next, you see. So but anyway, this one, which I didn't always do, I got some fancy dress for, because it was, believe it or not, there were trade wars going on. I guess this must have been 1999 or something like that. Once again, there was trade tariffs coming in, and we were trying to stop imports of Texan beef because they were injected with hormones and stuff. So exactly the same thing that's going on, actually, or will be happening at the moment. They're wanting to dump all this stuff on us without the EU standards. So that was happening then. So I wrote this little thing about it. I won't play much, but this is a bit of a lark.
We don't do things small in Texas. We haul them up, we round them in. We eat red steak for breakfast, and the hormones, and then there are steers. They're the subjects, groundless fears, and there ain't no cause for alarm. They ain't done us any harm, and we don't do things small in Texas. We don't like to be rejected. We'll blow you up, we'll go to war to make sure our interests are...
Anyway, that sort of thing.
I like the costume.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And the song. Very good. So you're doing this and you're working on this. And also, you told me something interesting. You wrote a musical as well.
Just before that, I wrote a sort of children's song cycle, which was based on the Oscar Wilde story, The Happy Prince. So that became an album. There that is, and a big concert with 250 children, and that was read by Julie Christie, none other than that Julie Christie, which would be enough to give certain men of a certain age a little bit of a shiver. In fact, she came for lunch. By that time, my studio was in the roof of the house, and she came for lunch, and we had all the tables set for her and everything. But when she first came, she said, "Would you like to stay for lunch?" And she said, after she'd done the recording, she said, "No, I've got to go. But she obviously enjoyed recording with me so much that she says, "All right, I will stay for lunch," and made particular reference to the quality of my wife, well, ex-wife's lemon fluff. So there you go. Julie Christie loved my wife's lemon fluff, and that was about that. Then I went on to write a musical.
Right.
And yes, because that was my divorce musical, talking of ex-wives, and that had a few good tunes in it, and in fact it got directed by Craig Revel-Horwood, who then went on to become a judge in Strictly Come Dancing and all that stuff, and so you'd be probably familiar with him, Mr. Nasty. Although he's not Mr. Nasty in real life, but that's his sort of character there, and that had a few quite nice songs in it. One of them was Where is Mr. Right? Where is he tonight? Where, oh, where is my dreamboat soulmate? Where's my long lost old mate? Where is Mr. Right? There's Mr. Good, there's Mr. Great, there's Mr. Funny, there's Mr. Straight. But this little Miss Unlucky in love, she feels she's just have to wait, or something like that. Anyway, that turned into this. Oh, sound.
Where is Mr. Right? Where is he tonight? Where, oh, where is my dreamboat soulmate? Where's my long lost old mate? Where is Mr. Right? Where is Mr. Right? What will he be like? When, oh, when will I feel his presence? When he makes his entrance, I'll know Mr. Right. There's Mr. Safe,
Etc., etc.
So, I imagine that was quite a traumatic time for you, but it inspired the musical. And would you say that there were things happening in your real life that was inspiring your music?
Yeah, oh, yeah, definitely. I was, I guess that's the thing. Right, the callback would be back to writing the song about the postcode. It's topical. So then I became a topical songwriter. Sort of, I'd say by profession, but there wasn't a great deal of money in doing it. But still, that's what I was doing. And then the musical, which was about what I was going through, or at least trying to describe the process of the relationships and divorce and all those things. Yes, was topical about that, certainly. And also, it sort of gave me permission to write in a longer form, and and also to take a few more risks. And be a little bit, gutsier, I suppose. And then simultaneously and at the same time, I suppose I also started seeing, because it was, traumatic divorce, I also started seeing a therapist as well, which is where we sort of start to get the Jewish story coming back in.
Yeah. And well, I was just going to pick up on taking risks, because when I first got to know you, which was back in 2005, and I suspect many of our audience tonight, you took the risk to come to Edinburgh. You'd never been in Edinburgh before. You'd never been at the Fringe. So it's a risky thing to do. But I guess there's something even more risky that you did that propelled you to Edinburgh, which is you wrote a song about what happened when you were very young. You were going to Sunday school, as it were. Meanwhile, your father was meant to be doing the laundry. And
yes.
You wrote a song that I guess many people here might be familiar with, the Suburban Washerama.
The Suburban, yeah, the Suburban.
Is that right?
Although, interestingly, my friend Robin Hirsch in New York, who for a while ran the Cornelia Street Cafe, where I played a lot, he calls it the Washington Cerberama, so similar kind of thing. Right.
So tell us a bit about that song, because if anybody else knows it, it's a funny song. It's poignant. There's even bits where we can all join in. But it's written out what I guess must have been a traumatic time.
Well, tragedy plus time equals comedy. But yes, I don't know. I actually started it because it was my birthday. And I had, and still do have, this kind of habit of writing bespoke birthday songs. and I thought, it's my birthday, I'm going to write myself a song. And so I started, and that's really where it started. And then as I started it, shall I tell you about my childhood? And also, I was just starting to have some therapy here, so that's really where the connections, lie on this divan is how it goes. So let us delve deeper into your psychic, your psychic, in fact.
Do you want to play just that opening?
Oh, yeah.
And everybody should probably get a flavour of it, I think.
Yeah, sure. I've just got my headphones are dropping out my ears. Just 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
Let me tell you about my childhood. Let me lie on this divan. If you sit comfortably for me, I'll tell you a story that mouldeth and maketh this man. Let's go on a journey, and let me take you by the hand, and lead you through the suburban streets to the stain on my parents' sheets where my life began. Well, my mum and dad were Jewish, and we all went to the shul, but for reasons only known to them, they decided they would send their kids to the Church of England school, which incidentally several years later was turned into a synagogue, which goes to show you God has a sense of humour, unless of course you don't believe in God. Now, interestingly enough, that school, which was then called Long Ditton Infant School, became Kingston Liberal Synagogue, and in fact was Danny Rich's synagogue for a while. Then it was the rabbi there was Charlie Beginski, and she invited me back to the school to do a concert, which was now the Shul, where I sang that song in the old what was the old school hall where I'd been as a child. I mean, and the only Jewish children, Adam will vouch for this, in that we used to sit out of assembly whilst the strange things used to go on in the main hall as the vicar came in and presented prizes or did whatever. They'd be singing hymns and we'd be hearing the word Jesus and cowering. So it was very, very odd to be able to go back there and do a concert.
So it's a real storytelling song. Yeah. It has twists and turns. It goes into unexpected places, and it builds up and it builds up. And again, just because we're a bit short of the time, it tells the story of your father having an affair, your mum and dad's marriage splitting up, and you eventually moving to Leeds.
Yes.
Having written this, how did you feel about sharing that with other members of your family?
I was very apprehensive. I sent it to my dad, and I sent it to Mary, who was the tempting siren that had lured him into becoming unfaithful at the laundrette, if he hadn't been before. And I sent it to them, and they said, love it. They love it. In fact, Mary, who's down to earth northerner, from actually a mining community in Denby, Maine, very, very insular. Actually, the mining community. Her family, her father was a miner, her brother was a miner. They either went down the mines or they joined the police. That's all they did. And but there were some similarities between Orthodox Judaism and mining communities. They're very, they have a wall around them. So anyway, she called a spade as our Mary, and she sent me actually a note back that she wrote at the time. She put it in an envelope and it said, "Fucking great," is what she said. So that was a relief. My dad's all right with it. Mary's all right with it. But then I've got my mum to deal with, and my mum was not so pleased, it has to be said. And in fact, so much so that she sort of really, I can't bear it. I can't, if you even come anywhere near Leeds, which is where she was, and my father and Mary were just outside Manchester at the time. I can't bear it. If you come play that song in Leeds, you don't do it. So I would go to Leeds when I would get gigs now, because we've kind of glossed over the bit about me getting gigs in the Jewish world and out of it with this material. And so she would, I'd have to, first of all, when I went, I would actually not play it. And then and even then, she decided that she would come, and she sat on the front row. And then, as I started the first song, she walked out. And then, in the middle of the next one, she walked back in again, in order to make some kind of a point, possibly that her need for attention was greater than mine. So that was really how well it went down with my parents, kind of equal and opposite, both sides.
It's a hard thing seeing yourself portrayed in a play or a drama, or even in a song. So it's understandable, perhaps, that not everybody in your family was, happy or comfortable.
Yes, I don't think I think I was reasonably fair to my mother, though. I don't think actually. But yes, even so, probably and quite possibly, I might have maybe the same treatment might happen to me at some point, and I'll be horrendously embarrassed, and put out a cease and desist.
Well, I think the lovable thing about the song is, or the nice thing about the song is, all the characters come out as, in a way, lovable for us, the audience. And your mum, comes out quite strong. So it's nice for us. But talking of risks, so you've got a therapist, and I think, if I understand right, you're beginning to think about your Jewish background again. You get the show together, and you go to Edinburgh. And yes. I saw the first show, and yes. Apart from that song that we've talked about, there was other Jewish content in it, and
not much. But I guess what the therapist did and helped me with was to recognise that it was kind of all Jewish content, whether I knew it or not, and and it was all kind of everything that I've done is kind of Jewish behaviour, whether I knew it or not. It informs everything, and suddenly it's like it was a revelation. And in the show, I have this bit of shtick about, an old rabbi coming out of the mist of time and telling me to write Jewish music. And it was a very, very strong vision. It really happened. And I would say that the Jewish materials, which most of you here are familiar with, it came from that. It was almost like the moving finger wrote. It was not my choice. Suddenly, all the skill that I had built up over the years, everything was leading to this point, and then suddenly I didn't expect to be or want to be, and I certainly didn't feel like I was a religious Jew. I might have been a spiritual one, maybe somewhere in, and again that's something that I wrestle with, it seemed like everything led up to that moment, and all those things came together, and it turned me into this thing, which I suddenly started getting gigs and opportunities and all over the world to do.
Yeah. And in 2005, you're playing in a small venue, but I was involved in what we call the Festival Open Day at the Edinburgh Synagogue, and you very kindly came along. Other performers came and talked about their shows and then played extracts. And I think you enjoyed that, didn't you?
Well, I had, prior to that, I had not played that song, the Surbiton Washarama, which, if those of you that are familiar with it, well, you know it, and those that don't, I mean, it does go into all sorts of places. It's very Jewish. It's very funny about being Jewish. It has all those things in it. A lot about a lot of gefilte fish in that song, and but this was the first time I'd actually even been in a synagogue for years. I've been to my brother's wedding, and I think that was it. And so to go to the Edinburgh Synagogue in the middle of this festival, which was in itself a complete, I don't know, it was like another world. I was disorientated, and I was doing two shows. I was doing a children's show in the morning, actually, of The Happy Prince that we saw earlier, and I was doing this one in the afternoon, the Surbiton Washarama, and other stories. And so to go along to the synagogue where I hadn't set foot, I didn't know what it was going to be like. And then as soon as I walked in, it was like the smell of bagels and not very good coffee and all that stuff that you get, the smell of a kiddush, really, and also the smell of just the feel of, at that point, because we're now talking 15 years ago, some of the community in Edinburgh who I'm sure have passed on now, but they were still of the old school. They were still of the shtetl, and so there was that. The accents were not necessarily all Edinburgh. There were Eastern European accents in there. It was like suddenly I was in. It was Mishpucha. So so then I played after you interviewed various people, and you were waiting for Rain Pryor to turn up, and she didn't, I think. So I got the piano out and I played this song. I was absolutely petrified because I'd never played it to a Jewish audience before, and I'd never played it in a synagogue. And all that, and was it going to be blasphemous? All these things. What's going on? And Rabbi Rose was there. Oh, I think of it, and all that stuff. And I played it, and of course, it brought the house down. It was fantastic. It was it was a real highlight of and it gave me the confidence to say, "Oh yeah, this is what I do. This is good." And and it plays to non-Jewish audiences, and it plays to Jewish audiences even better.
Well, I was going to say. I mean, you talk about the Jewish influences in your work, but in your songwriting, in your storytelling songwriting, you're not unlike someone like Victoria Wood. You're telling a story. The lyrics are good, interesting, plus the music. So I think it works. Well, as you've found, it works both for Jewish audience, non-Jewish audience, etc. And so over the years, we've met on every festival. You've come to that open day, and your shows have developed, and you've added more material, more original songs, and songs about your family as well. Do you want to just talk about the other members of your family that you've written songs about?
Well, I mean, I there are some that I haven't. I haven't done one about Adam, apart from when we were little, and he's waving his finger at me. It's a bit like talking to a medium. Because he's there, Adam's there, he's waving his finger, he's saying, "Don't tell that story," and I haven't, because and I probably won't, probably. Because I'm sensitive to that, and also I don't know, so, and I don't need to. For some reason, the Washarama one was therapy for me as much as anything. But certainly my grandparents, they've had a lot of mileage, and my father and me too. So yes, and other slightly more removed members of the family, because there seem to be stories. There seem to, and particularly there's a kind of history of Jewish storytelling which I feel like I'm tapping into. Right from Shalom Aleichem coming forward, and there's something that the community recognises in all these characters. So that's how that works.
I think you said you might play one about your grandfather.
Yeah, I could do. Well, I thought if I do, it's probably this time I actually did a whole one, and so I thought the one about the cricket would be quite good, because that is we got thumbs up from I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't read it. Is that Janet up in the corner? Okay, that's great. I thought just quickly, because we were talking about going to Edinburgh and coming, so I've been back to Edinburgh every year, as you all know. Since then, I just found this was a picture of me in front of one of the old big posters that you pay a fortune for, and then that was the year, as you might remember, that sorry about the transition, didn't intend it, but this happened. There's the same poster, and then there's all that going. So that is a good question and a good subject to look at. How is it you are? Not that I'm trying to tell you what questions to ask me, but how it is as a sort of professional Jewish performer. What happens when this sort of thing happens, and how that affects the content of your work and how your work is perceived and received. So there we go. But that was quite a difficult moment. You'll see there are Palestinian flags on the eyes and the mouth, symbolism there. So that is that, and then of course coming up to the present day, which was last year's promo, and I think the promo for this particular speech. So the song that I'm going to do is called Grandpa and Me, and it's my grandpa was cricket mad, basically. And we had moved to London, the family. I was a little boy, Adam was little, and Jonathan was a little bit older. And they used to come down to visit from Bradford before they retired. They made Aliyah, actually, shortly after that. But they used to come and visit. And wherever he went, even if it was Shabbos, he would want to go to a cricket match. You've got to go to the cricket match. And so it happened that there was one at the Oval, the Kensington Oval, and he said, I don't think it was Shabbos, but anyway, he said, would any of the children would like to come with? And Adam and Jonathan both very, very wisely said, But like a fool, I said, oh, yes, please, Grandpa. I thought this would be quite nice. I'd go on a little trip with my grandpa. So off we went to the cricket match. I was about 5 or 6, and this is basically what happened. My grandfather took me to Kennington Oval when I was about 6 years old, and he tried to explain all the rules of the game, and he gave me a scorecard to hold. But all I could see was some men in white jumpers, occasionally moving and running and stuff, and a building on which they displayed random numbers, which I couldn't possibly hope to add up. My grandfather gave me some tea from his flask and unwrapped for me 2 sugar lumps. He said, there is the batsman and there is the bowler, and those are the bails and the stumps. Those are the covers and that is the boundary. There's silly mid on and there's silly mid off. And I of course thought that was so silly sounding, and repeated it until he said, that's enough. Some things you remember, some things you forget, but this I recall vividly. When we went to the Kennington Oval, my grandpa and me. Well, we sat there in silence for what seemed like a lifetime, as the sky turned from white to dark grey. And then he held his newspaper over our heads as the rain interrupted play. We stood in a shelter, and every 2 minutes I'd ask him, Grandpa, is the rain going to stop? And he'd look at the sky and he'd scrunch up his eye and say, maybe it will, but then again maybe not. Some things you remember, some things you forget, but this I recall vividly. When we went to the Kennington Oval, my grandpa and me. Grandpa was a doctor in 5 Lane Ends, Bradford, and his surgery was in the house at the back. And despite his religiousness, he'd do his rounds in the car on Yom Tov and Shabbat. Grandma and Grandpa kept a kosher household, 2 sets of cutlery, 2 sets of plates, 1 for the milkik and 1 for the fleischik. God help them if they got mixed up by mistake. Before their son David got married, they taught this practice to their future daughter-in-law, who, though her family were Jewish, they were Reformed Jewish, and to them that was almost not Jewish at all. If you must know the truth, said my grandma to Ruth, on the night of your wedding there's a thing you must do, and it will only take you a couple of minutes. Then, God willing, you'll give us a grandchild or 2. But this is all just hearsay. As for me, I only remember the day when my grandparents came down to London to stay, and Yorkshire were playing against Surrey away. And on that visit we watched the cricket and he held my hand so tightly when we went to the Kennington Oval, my grandpa and me. Well, my parents divorced, and we children, of course, we had little further contact. And my father's affair with a non-Jewish woman, they weren't prepared to accept that. Though the children she bore him were their grandchildren too, despite the request for their blessing, the letters unopened, the law had been broken, no forgiving and no forgetting. But that was the old world, this is the new. Everything changes and how. And my grandpa's collection of cricket and prayer books, they're not much use to him now. Grandpa, if he'd lived to see all this and more, I think we can imagine what he might have thought. The bright coloured tracksuits, the pink and the white ball, he'd say that's just not cricket, not cricket at all. I've been to their graves in Netanya, and as I light the yard-side candles for them, I ask them if they remember being caught in the rain near the Vauxhall Inn. And now I've a grandson myself, and when he is old enough, we'll go to the Kennington Oval, my grandson and me.
Lovely, thank you. So, through these 15 years of developing your songs, you've been exploring your culture, your faith. What has that journey been like? And I mean, I know playing at the Fringe back in 2005 took you on a physical journey to America and other places.
The Fringe has been very. Every year something happens. That's why you go to. I mean, you lose a load of money, of course, and you go through a whole load of stress, and it takes years off your life and all those things. But something happens that's unexpected. That's what goes on, as well as obviously meeting everybody here and doing all those things and just actually making friends and all that stuff. But some unexpected thing happens, and so I've been, because of that, I've been invited to do gigs across the world, really, to Australia and then to in America and Germany, of course, which was quite an experience, which I've written about in a song called "There Are No Jews in Recklinghausen," and that was in itself quite interesting because they said they'd seen me at the in Edinburgh. When they wrote to me and said, "Would you come and do our festival?" And they sent me a contract and everything. I really did question, "Are you sure you got the right show here?" And in the contract it didn't say, because I was calling the thing Jewish Chronicles at the time. It didn't have the title of the show in the contract anywhere, and so that's because, like, why isn't that written down? So I was really very suspicious of the whole thing, but and I got there, and they couldn't have been friendlier and nicer, even though the hotel they put me in was full of the owner. It was a little hotel in the high street, and it was a family-owned hotel, and there were lots of pictures of him and his family from previous years in uniform. So that was a little disconcerting, but on the whole, the festival-going audience, the English was pretty good, and I had everything translated into German. They all had little prayer books, and it was quite something to see them singing along with the Surbiton Washarama, I can tell you. And slightly reluctantly, it must be said, but yes, and they're all going "Hey, hey!" at the end. you know, it was surreal, really surreal. I hadn't written a song about it then, but I did. You know, but it was actually what was really nice was people would come up to me and say, thanks for not mentioning the elephant in the room, because they have tons of it, you know, tons of Holocaust theatre and all those kinds of things. So really all I was doing is exactly the same shtick as I had done in Edinburgh and other places, and just went a tiny bit slower, but not that much, because that's my nature. And it seemed to go down really, really well. The one they particularly liked, actually, was the one about Naomi. This is interesting. I've never thought why they liked it so much, but there's a song I have about a true story. Oh yes, he was talking about other members of the family that I've written about. My Aunt Naomi, my mother's sister, Ruth and Naomi. Naomi, at the age of 19, ran away to join a Christian cult, and in fact married the preacher, and was the preacher's wife. And they run in Ramsgate. The church is still there, so it was the story of how she left the fold, and how she spoke in tongues and all this kind of thing, and the rabbi was not much use to her, and so she eventually, the only people that could explain why she had this vision of Jesus was the church. So they liked that one, and I'm now just figuring out in my head why they particularly liked it. Discussed afterwards. So that was one of the things that went on, and then of course going to America and sort of you know, getting to play in different places on both coasts and sometimes in the middle, and then also some of the other material that I've been writing that was not necessarily the storytelling stuff, but more songs from my heart about how I feel about the world and how I feel about, you know, a spiritual practice, if you like, which, and how that fits in to some extent to Jewish practice, and I've been trying to work this out. Suddenly somebody heard that in the Jewish music world in America and started picking up on that, and then I find, almost out of the blue, I've got cantors across America in various temples and stuff who are starting to sing my material, not the Serbian Washarama obviously, but other stuff. And you know, who knew that was going to happen? An absolute surprise, you know.
And what is it meant to you? I mean, what has it changed the way you look at your culture, your faith, and?
I feel much warmer to it because if you like, not having anything to do with it, it wasn't out of malice. It was just out of disinterest, and the fact that my interest has peaked, and suddenly I see myself as one of these characters in one of these Jewish stories, and as a Jewish storyteller, and standing on the shoulders of those other people, has made my relationship not only with just cultural Judaism, but also there's something about it, and actually I'm still drawn to some extent to Orthodoxy, just in the look and feel of it, even for all its issues, which we won't go into. But you know, I've got a song called Yiddish Waltz, and there's a thing in it. I never do this, but it goes, when I listen to the cantor singing at the midnight selichot, I hear get questions, but no answers, and a deafening silence from God. But something inside cavils up with pride, whether my faith be true or be false. Whatever, something to it, we can't be immune to it. We all love the tune to it. This is the Yiddish waltz, the Yiddish waltz, etc., etc. But you know, in that. And that was one of the earlier ones that I wrote. First of all, yes, I'd gone to a midnight selichot service. I'd heard a cantor doing the whole thing, and you know, all that. And then when you go on Kol Nidre and you hear that, even when Neil Diamond does it in the film, you can't help it. You're going boing. It's like being plugged into the grid. So there is all that goes on, and then you discover the world of American Reform Judaism, which is a totally different kind of thing and is the predominant form. And that has its moments as well that I found a way in through some of the music, actually. But I also have, reservations and doubts, and I express those. And I think, as we all do, we all do. It's all a bit odd. it's reminding me of something that my my brother, the astrologer. So I was walking out of the synagogue, the Orthodox synagogue in Muswell Hill that I started going to after a while. That's where I lived in London until fairly recently. And walking after it, I was with the shamus, with the caretaker, and he's walking about. And he says, "So, your brother, the astrologer, he says, you don't believe in that mumbo jumbo, do you?" And then I sort of turned round, I pointed at the synagogue, and I said, "Well, and this mumbo jumbo and that mumbo jumbo. I mean, it's the world's full. We all have our own flavour of Even Richard Dawkins, believes in a certain kind of mumbo jumbo. So you find your place. You find your place in it. And there have been too many sort of miraculous coincidences on this journey to doing what I'm doing. From not going into a synagogue to suddenly being invited into them and asking to play music in them. My grandparents would be turning in their grave on Yom Kippur. In fact, this is the first Yom Kippur for the last 3 years that I've not been playing songs in a synagogue on Yom Kippur.
In America.
In America, yes, in America, obviously, and also in Crouch End. I did one in Crouch End too, but that's very, very, very progressive. So yes, my grandparents, Oliver Shalom, what's they doing? They're singing, but I don't know. So I'm this kind of hybrid Hebrew thing. And feeling my way around and my relationship to it, and on finding out about all the different shapes and sizes and flavours there is in the Jewish world, and also how it translates into the non-Jewish world, and how it sits there, and how this material actually plays. And I don't make it any different for a non-Jewish audience than I do for a Jewish one, because it still plays, because the themes and the stories and the characters are universal, because we have different detail. That's all.
Well, I think there's a lot in that that transfers to other faiths and no faiths at all. We're all questioning the world we're in and why we're here. Now I'm questioning. I don't know how much more time we've got. Maybe Janet can let me know. But I know you've got another couple of songs that you were. Do you want to play one more?
Yeah, probably is only time for one. Although if you want to hear more, you got to pay. No, you don't. I don't know about that. Well, maybe. But I am actually doing something else on Sunday. Actually, I'm doing it's still a shortish set, but maybe half an hour, 35 minutes, with another sort of Jewish songwriter that visits Edinburgh quite a bit, and also comes to the Shul Open Day as well, with Dean Friedman. And he's got his little songwriting festival thing going on Sunday, and I'll be doing a little set in that about 6 o'clock, probably different material to this. And I'll also will be doing a full concert by Zoom sometime I haven't nailed the date down yet, but you can find this out. I'll let you know, David, and all that sort of stuff. Sometime before Rosh Hashanah, basically. And I would probably call it Jewish New Year Chronicles, and just so that there's and also I know it'll be a bit late, and you could say kind of post Edinburgh. This would have been the Edinburgh show the Edinburgh show you missed,
And I think it's worth saying, because you mentioned Dean's thing and the concert you're going to do before Rosh Hashanah, it's worth saying that during this time, during the festivals and before the festivals, there's been a lot of free stuff online because artists and actors can't work in theatres. There's been a lot of free stuff, but there are a few things that you're asked to pay or donate for. So I think if we can all just be aware of that. But in any case, enjoy what's happening digitally and online, and hopefully as soon as possible we'll be back in theatres and concert halls and synagogues.